There's been some interesting developments, an interesting story that broke over the last 24 hours, and I'm going to talk about that. Of course, I am talking about, well, maybe not of course, but here's what I'm talking about. The admission by Black Indigo that she participated in a porno. First of all, I think she had enough clout and enough fans to be able to come onto YouTube and say, hey, I'm having a hard time, can you guys help me out? Just set up a little PayPal account, and I know that somebody would have sent her some money, and I think she would have gotten a whole lot more than $1.50. A lot of the big YouTubers have at one point e-begged. The Amazing Atheist, SXE Phil, Damien from Make Me Bad, Bohem, it's just too many to name. And most of them came away with hundreds, if not thousands. And I'm not saying she would have gotten thousands, but she could have. Anyway, at this point, I guess that's neither here nor there, or maybe she still could get some help. I don't know. Anyway. The next thing I want to talk about is all the people she supposedly disappointed. How I feel about that is, I understand that when you talk a certain game or supposedly live a certain lifestyle, there's just stuff you just can't do. For example, if you're a pastor and you fall on hard times, it wouldn't be acceptable for you to become a gigolo to make up for your losses. That goes against who you're supposed to be as a pastor. But if we're talking about a regular guy who's not a pastor, and we'll say that he's not even a Christian, and he becomes a gigolo to make up for his losses, even if you don't agree with what he's doing morally, at least he's not doing something that's against what he's supposed to stand for as a person. And that's kinda how it is with Black Indigo. It's not so much that she did what she did, it's that it seems to go against what she was talking about in her videos. If she weren't who she was and had been talking all the things she was talking, what she did wouldn't even be that big of a deal. What she did, and I'm talking about her, not them other chicks. Stuff like that goes on all the time in bachelorette parties. They hire a male stripper and he dances around, flops his little thing around and everybody takes a feel. It probably even happens in some strip clubs even though you're not supposed to feel, but who's gonna tell, the guy? Alright, moving right along. I really hate that she got paid so little money for what she did. And for all you holy mollies out there saying more money wouldn't have made it any better, well, let me stick it to you this way. Remember that show that used to come on called Fear Factor, where they'd have you eat crazy shit like rotten pig guts with maggots on it? If somebody offered you $10, would you eat any of that stuff they were serving up on Fear Factor? Well, of course not. And why is that? Because the payoff is not worth the trouble. But up that to $50,000, I might have to start thinking about it. Up it to $500,000, it's a very good possibility. $1 million, I'm there. See, the benefits of the $1 million will long outlast that temporary discomfort of eating that food. You might even get sick for a couple of days. But when you get well, you got $1 million to spend. However, in her case, the effects of what she did are going to far outlast that money. In fact, that money was spent before she even made it. And I'm not saying do it or don't do it. I'm saying if you do, make sure it's worth it. Make sure that whatever you do is actually going to rectify the situation, not just postpone it a little bit or put a band-aid on it. Next point. One thing I think really irritated her supporters was that she didn't seem to be remorseful or sorry. Now, I'm not saying she needed to be, but I think that would have been the attitude that people would be expecting. I think, and I'm not necessarily saying this happened to her, but sometimes when you're part of a movement, something can happen where you feel that the movement quote-unquote let you down, or you can just become fatigued with it. Here's an analogy. Let's say you go on a diet. Now, when you first start, of course, you're going to be all gung-ho and you're going to go to the gym every day and you're going to eat what you're supposed to eat and yada yada yada. Usually you're going to lose the most weight at one time when you first start your diet, and as you get closer and closer to your goal weight, it's going to get harder and harder to lose. But anyway, you start on your diet and the pounds start dropping off, but then maybe you hit a plateau, or for some other reason you gain some weight back and you don't know why. That's really frustrating. If you know you've been working your ass off and the ass just isn't coming off, that gets real old real fast. A lot of times it makes people give up and quit. That was redundant. And I could see how that same thing could happen to someone who's in a movement like the Black Power movement or the Black Consciousness movement, whatever they want to call it. When you first become so-called enlightened, you become all excited and optimistic and gung-ho and, oh yeah, we're going to build this black nation and restore ourselves to the kings and queens we once were. We're going to take back over the continent of Africa and kick every white devil out. And it's all Harambe and let's get together in cooperative economics. Umoja and Kujichakulia. But let you lose your job, and then you go to the brothers and the sisters for help. But they give a bunch of excuses, legitimate excuses, but excuses nonetheless for why they can't help you. Or they just want to pray with you, or tell you something about what the ancestors did. Exactly what is the point of all this if we can't depend on each other? If it's going to be every man for himself, then what are we doing this for? So if you've been quote unquote faithful in the movement, and then you fall on hard times and you can't find nobody to back you up, that doesn't exactly strengthen your faith. I could totally see how that could make somebody say, fuck this movement, I'm going to do what I got to do. I'll come back when I get in a better position, but right now, I got to keep the lights on. I got to keep food in my mouth. Junebug Obama, shout out to him, made a video about the Octomom and how she was offered X amount of dollars to do a porno. And he asked the question or something like it, like, what would you do for your kids? And I left a comment saying, like, honestly, I can't say what I would or wouldn't do if it came to feeding my kids. I can't even stand for my dog to go hungry, let alone my child. And unless you've been faced with having a hungry child or just really in a bind, how do you know what you would or wouldn't do? Now, of course, there are some things I wouldn't do no matter what, at least I hope. But there are some things that I wouldn't normally do that I would do if I were in a bind. And I think most people would do a whole lot more than they think they would. The situation would just have to get desperate enough. Another point I wanted to make is that sometimes when people commit suicide, people will be talking after the fact, saying things like, oh, he could have called me any time and I would have talked to him. Why didn't he reach out to anybody? Well, a lot of times these people do reach out to somebody before they do it, but they get, oh, I'm busy, or can you call me back right after this? And then that gets the person thinking, well, I guess everybody's too busy for me and nobody cares, I might as well go on and do it. And I think that's what's happening with at least some people who are reacting to what Indigo did. They got all this stuff to say after the fact, oh, you could have called me, or why didn't you just do this or do that? But if somebody you knew called you up today and asked you for money, first of all, could you even loan it to them? And then if you could, would you? If you can't or won't, then why comment after the fact about what they should have done? Doing something like what she did usually isn't a first choice for someone. It's usually a last resort, meaning they exhausted multiple other options. There's really not much you can do for fast money outside of stealing, borrowing, or doing something sexual. So for all the people saying, well, you could have went and got a job at McDonald's, yeah, and get paid in 2 weeks. Well, that doesn't help me today. So anyway, that's my take on the Black Indigo situation. If she was gonna go the porn route, she should have gotten more money for it. And for those of you who are asking why aren't you condemning what she did, well, for one, I watch porn sometimes, so I can't really condemn it if I watch it. If I'm watching porn, then somebody had to make it. And that goes for all y'all watchers out there too. And I believe in the concept of consenting adults. If that's what she wants to do, that's her business, and the same thing goes for all the twerkers and the pant saggers and anybody else who does things that I wouldn't necessarily do myself. What she did may not line up with your own personal morals or even mine, but at the end of the day, what she did didn't hurt anybody. Oh, well, it hurt me because I'm so disappointed. Oh, fuck you, you're not hurt. And then some people made the argument, well, what if some kids might see her in the porn? Are you sick? Okay. If the kids are looking at porn, they got a bigger problem than Black Indigo being in it. They got parents who are sleeping on the job. But anyway, if people are doing things that don't hurt anybody, even if I don't agree with it, I really don't have much to say about it. That's their business, their life. As long as they're not asking me to support them or participate in it, they can do whatever they want. That's about all I got to say. Thank you for listening.